All right, so we're going to refactor the user. We're going to create this user provider now that is going to basically take the rest of the state management out of the application component. All right. Eventually, we'll create a second abstraction, which is a traditional higher order component abstraction, mostly to show that like this isn't the only way that you can do it. Do I need to mix and match? I don't know, maybe. But what I really want to show is that there are multiple ways to kind of like hook into Firebase and pass it along to your component. So we'll do users in two different ways, one now and one in a little bit. So let's start out with making that user provider. And again, this is ultimately going to be a whole lot of copy pasta from the application, but we're into it. So we'll use component. We also want create context. And we're going to need auth and create user profile document from that Firebase file that we have. Cool. And we know that we're going to need one of those context objects again. You can give it a default value. Our state is going to handle that, so we don't have to, but just to demonstrate. All right. And now we make a class of user provider. And that will have that same state in the beginning. This is, again, exactly what we have in the application component. And since we already took all of the post stuff, the big thing stopping me from copying and pasting too much of the posts for the post provider before was that all the user stuff was in there. But I got all that out, so I can just, there's a lot more copy-paste action here. I can take pretty much all of this, and I'm going to I'll cut it. So you can see how simple our application component is getting. We can paste all of that in. This will actually be this. And this is going to be we also need those children, so we'll say that'll eventually get passed in. So this will be that user context dot provider. And the value is going to be, in this case, the user. We'll pass in the children. And we'll export default. User provider. All right, so we've got that in place. The other thing we need to do is add it to that index.js, just like the other one. This can get a little ridiculous, but you could theoretically you can like compose them all together and create one if you needed to as well. We will be adding one more to the stack eventually, but all right. So we've got those three in place, and then for our authentication, we'll say need to pull in that use context as well. We don't need this one anymore. This doesn't exist. Neither does this. He says, with great fear, all right, application still works. So if you think about how big our application component was getting for the purposes of hooking up to Firebase and passing it down to components, this is what it is now. And like, could we make it a stateless functional component? Totally, we could. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader. But, and yeah, authentication has access to the user. Post has access to the posts. We're actually going to find another way to pass the user around as well in a little bit, as I've like foreshadowed a few times with a higher order component. But we can start taking out all this Firebase state and just wrapping it around our UI, right? So anything that needs something from Firebase, we can kind of pass it in and wrap it around those things. It doesn't become like a huge part of our application. It's just like, hey, like we kind of just don't think about the state too much anymore, right? And these providers handle it. Yeah.
Maybe a side question, maybe not relevant.
All right, into it.
It's about using hooks versus just using the consumer kind of. In your experience, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, are there good use cases for hooks?
I mean,
being the new hotness?
Hooks are still in like kind of the release candidates, so I'd wait and see how it shakes out. Some of this is like like kind of inspired by like recording and stuff along those lines. I think it's a nice like API, right? I don't think it matters though.
Okay, cool.
Right. Some like a lot of code bases I work on, we're not on 16.6 or 16.7 yet, right? And so that will also inform your choices as well, right? Like, at SendGrid we use MobX as effectively a poor man's context API, right? So we have a model, basically like for the things we want to be completely divorced from the rest of the application, props go in, they're all internally managed. With MobX, and then they spit stuff back out to Redux. So like, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. This is just one option. It is not the officially blessed version. I chose it because it was native and I didn't have to pull in a third-party library. So, and like I said, in the previous version of this course, we use Redux and Redux Thunk to send actions to Redux, and it's using the real-time database. But like, there is no difference from if you just hooked up to doc changes and did the same thing.